This edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose is sponsored by NVIDIA and Carasoft. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, building the next generation of intelligence community talent, AI advantages for today and tomorrow, and mapping the future for the entire federal government. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. Special coverage today from the GEOINT 2023 Symposium in St. Louis. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency lists its workforce as one of its top priorities. One of the leaders that's focused on that workforce is NGA's Deputy Director, Tonya Wilkerson. After she delivered a keynote address about the workforce at GEOINT, I asked her the message she wanted her audience to take away.
So the message was really focused on how we can attract the talent that we need to address the 21st century challenges. And it really started to focus around diversity and inclusion, and specifically how we can cultivate STEM talent and focus on GEOINT. It was a phenomenal opportunity to talk with members of not only the local St. Louis region, but also members of the NGA team as well. We had a chance to highlight some of the key initiatives that we have underway. This year we have a high school internship program that we're really excited about, and that's really focused on attracting talent much earlier in an educational career. And then we also had a chance to engage a bit as well about our college internships and scholarship opportunities.
What are the kinds of skills that you think the successful member of your team will have in 2 years, 5 years, and so on, as you try to anticipate how you want to build your workforce for the future?
So we really hire for all majors, all disciplines, but when we start to think about some of our critical and hard to fill positions, it really focuses in the STEM area. And so we hire STEM fields for certainly work with respect to our technology efforts and the like. And so that's an area that I think will continue to be a growing area. Data analytics certainly is one, as we know that we're facing increasing amounts of data in the coming years.
As I talked to some of the folks from your team this weekend, this week, I've seen that you're really trying to reshape your workforce and not just backfill when you have spaces. How are you going about analyzing where you think the agency will go moving forward in order to be able to shape that workforce the way that you want it to be and the way that it will need to be for the future?
So we spend time developing a strategic workforce plan, and that is really informed by what we anticipate will be the needs over the next several years. That's driven primarily in terms of what we anticipate in terms of new capabilities. And it helps us to really then hone in a bit more on exactly what types of skills we're going to need. And oftentimes we spend time talking about the recruitment of new talent, but we really don't want to miss the opportunity to also think about what it takes to continue to invest in our current workforce in their professional development and keeping their skills honed.
It's kind of the same idea that salespeople talk about. It's easier to keep a customer than find a new one. It's probably the same thing with your workforce, right?
It sure is.
What are the best things that you're finding work to keep your people on the team within NGA rather than letting them go?
So I really think it's about offering a wide range of opportunities. So when we think about when folks first hire on to the agency, they don't necessarily have to stay in the same work role that they came into the organization. They have an opportunity to move around and get other experiences that really helps to expand their breadth of knowledge, which is hugely helpful. So I think that helps. We also provide opportunities, of course, for additional training as well.
Yeah.
So those are good retention tools to help to continue to invest in our people.
Yeah, the strategy is interesting. One of your colleagues was here that will appear on the podcast in a couple of days, talking about the strategy is kind of a lattice rather than a ladder, where you don't necessarily climb rung on top of rung on top of rung, but there's opportunity for horizontal career development as well as vertical. Is that intentional, or is that just something that's kind of grown up over time?
It's something that's grown up over time, but it really does contribute to the breadth of experience. And it's not only internal to NGA, but there's also opportunities for our workforce to serve in other parts of the intelligence community. And then again, right, that really serves to broadening that experience and knowledge base that then can be brought back to NGA to help us continue to further our mission.
Your agency's kind of transformed over the last 10 or 15 years from a mostly proprietary organization that collected its own information into one that's using a really wide variety of data sources. How's that impacted the way that you shape that workforce, and how's that impacted the way that you execute the broader mission of the agency?
So we've certainly embraced commercial, and I'm sure it's not lost on you the amount of commercial imagery that's currently available. It helps us certainly with respect to being able to more easily share that content. And I think our workforce has really adapted very well to adopting commercial technologies and imagery.
Does that impact the way that you build the long-term strategy for the organization?
I wouldn't say that it definitively impacts how we build that strategy, but rather it is a piece that we have to make sure it's baked into the culture in terms of being willing to be early adopters of new ideas and new tech.
And I imagine that's driving the kind of the need for speed too. I hear about that a lot from leaders all across the Defense Department, and I imagine just the velocity of how quickly the data is coming at you from all these different sources is an important component too.
It is a very important component. And so when we look a few years out, we expect that we're going to continue to see an increasing volume of data. And that's where we really need to lean into technology. So things like artificial intelligence and machine learning really are enablers to quickly and rapidly fuse data from across disparate data sources, and to do so in a way that helps us to be able to draw meaningful outcomes. So leveraging AI ML is certainly something that we're focusing on. We anticipate that it's also really going to help us as we look to modernize our workflows.
What will that modernization of workflows encompass? Is that just kind of redoing the way that you're doing things now, or is that thinking about the ways you might have new mission delivery capabilities at some point in the future?
It includes things like being more dynamic with our collection activities. It's also an area that technology we could leverage for imagery exploitation, and then also helping to accelerate our reporting workflows. So hugely helpful for us in our mission space.
You talked at the beginning of our conversation about the importance of diversity and inclusion across the workforce. What's the implication for that in the mission of the agency, and how have you seen that manifest itself in the work that you've done in that area so far?
So from my vantage point, the implication really centers around ensuring that we don't fall into groupthink, right? That we have an opportunity to leverage diverse perspectives, diverse experiences, individuals with diverse backgrounds to really optimize our ability to deliver the outcomes that we need for our mission. Those outcomes being how we look at data and draw analytic judgments that can be shared with policymakers and decision makers. That's so key. If everybody's looking at it through the same lens, we may miss something, and we certainly don't want to do that. We can't afford to do that in our line of business.
Is there a way to measure that you're getting the kinds of results in that area that you would like to, or is it more a case that you know it when you see it? When you see this doesn't look the same way that it might have looked in the past or in another case?
So to measure it, I think it really it's really about how we glean from our workforce, their ability to ensure that we're drawing the right conclusions at the right time, and that they're able to see that there's an opportunity for there to be good discussion and debate and in helping to get to that final outcome.
Another area of your expertise is in financial management as the deputy director. What does that look like? What does shaping the resource requests and the resource utilizations look like in light of some of the changes that we've talked about?
So resource management is a large part of what I spend my time on. Interestingly enough, and I think it's really fantastic, we just recently revamped our strategic objectives with the arrival of the new director. And one of those strategic objectives focuses on strengthening our stewardship of GEOINT resources. And that's really thinking about how we, in a constrained budget environment, focus on not only honoring our commitments today, but also ensure that we're investing smartly in our future. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of time is spent on how do we streamline the managing of those resources to make sure that we're optimizing.
Yeah, so optimization, it sounds to me, is not just how do we save money or how do we cut costs. It's how do you deploy those resources in a way that's more efficient, more effective?
More efficient and definitely more effective.
Mm-hmm. What do you see we just have about 30 seconds left. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for you to grow in any of the areas that we've talked about today?
So I think the biggest growth area for us is in our talent arena. And I say that because really when we talk about all of the things that we do with respect to mission, it's the people that matter. The people get the job done. And so the amount of time that we spend investing in our current workforce and then the time spent recruiting the workforce of the future is the biggest opportunity space.
Tonya Wilkerson, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
You can read more about GEOINT at fedgovtoday.com. Coming next, AI advantages for today and tomorrow. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today. Welcome back. Technology and tactical leaders in the intelligence community say artificial intelligence will give them the ability to process data faster than humans ever could. Bob Pette's Vice President of Visualization at NVIDIA. At GEOINT 2023, I asked him what advantages AI is providing for the military and the government overall.
Using the technology that has rapidly developed over the last couple of years to help protect lives, to help improve lives. There's a lot of advancements in AI for the last 5 years, but it's really on this exponential curve. The time it took things like WhatsApp or Facebook to take off and get to, say, 100 million users might have been 4 years. ChatGPT, 2 months to get to 100 million users. So, and we'll see that same kind of logarithmic growth in the use of AI. So I know some people are afraid of the technology. Like anything, things can be used for good and bad. So tonight, I'd really just like people to understand that why we're creating it. The basis of the AI algorithms and the infrastructure is, we believe that it can do a lot of good. We believe that it can save lives, that it can detect cancer. It shouldn't be able to do anything that a human can't do. It can just do it so much faster. So where speed is important, where latency is important, whether it's figuring out, a path out of a particular zone, whether it's figuring out anomalies, detecting bad guys, the use of AI is really going to revolutionize the way we protect our citizens and protect our countries. And it's much more accessible than it ever has been.
What are the foundational technologies that practitioners like those here at this show will rely on that underpin what AI will be able to do for them? Yeah,
there's several important ones. The one that I'm going to talk about tonight is really a large language model AI use. People perceive ChatGPT as kind of a Uber search engine. It'll tell you anything you want really fast. But that concept of a large language model, when trained with the right data, industry-specific data, trained with geospatial data, trained with sensor data, trained with all the information that you want, depending on whether it's warfighter preparedness or battlefield training or the like. That large language model then will be able to make decisions for you in real time when needed. And a lot of people are using AI to auto tag images, to do facial recognition and the like, and that's all important stuff. But the scale at which it could be used to improve the ingestion of imagery, the tagging of that imagery, is really not prevalent yet in the industry, but it will be. There's so many possibilities of use. I think the biggest one has to be how to continue to process what's an ever-growing amount of data as fast as possible. And you're going to do that with a well-trained large language model, GeoGPT, if you will.
What encompasses a well-trained algorithm?
Yeah, it's a good question because like most things, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? But it's actually more than that because the neural network, the AI, learns how to think and might see connections that you don't think are there. So you don't want to train like a GeoGPT just with a bunch of map data or just with a certain classification of map data. You might give it everything that you can think of, whether it's Wikipedia, information on population trends, weather. The more information that you feed it, and this requires a significant amount of compute power, but the more information you could feed it, even if you think the data isn't necessarily relevant to what you're trying to do, it can make those connections and begin to see what data it's missing. It's like, well, if you want me to answer that question, I need to see more information on X, Y, and Z. So I think just being able to not be afraid to expose it to as much information as possible, still put guardrails in, but as much information as possible, as much data as possible is real key.
Bob, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, mapping the future of the federal government. You're watching FedGov Today with Francis Rose. Be right back. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today. Welcome back to FedGov Today's special coverage of GEOINT 2023. Mapping is one of the basic components of geospatial intelligence. Geographers in the federal government say it's still important to produce paper maps. Lee Schwartz is Geographer of the United States and Director of the Office of the Geographer at the State Department. At GEOINT 2023, I asked him about his office's mission.
Well, I'm at the Department of State, and I'm the director of the Office of the Geographer and Global Issues. And that office, in some shape or form, has been around for 100 years now. We recently celebrated our 100th anniversary. And my official responsibilities, or the responsibilities that are tied to that position, have to do with providing official U.S. government policy on international boundaries, so that all government agencies need to follow the guidance, the boundary guidance, and the cartographic guidance that our office issues on maps that they produce. So that's what the job officially is assigned with doing. But functionally, we are part of the Intelligence Research Bureau, so we do intelligence analysis on transboundary issues, sort of soft power issues, if you will, human trafficking, food security, infectious diseases, human rights, a lot of those issues that aren't specific to a particular region. And we joined the Intelligence Research Bureau after World War II, and in support of our policy bureaus, when there was a topic that didn't fit neatly into a region, like Asia or South America, they kind of threw it into the geographer's office. And so now we do all these transboundary functional issues in addition to the traditional cartography and boundary issues that we follow.
You've been a pretty active participant in this event in particular. You had a keynote here. What was the message you wanted to convey to the audience there?
Well, the message I conveyed to this audience was related to the theme of the GEOINT symposium, which is maps to metaverse. And I think I'm sort of old school. I'm a traditional geographer. I got all my college degrees in geography, taught geography at the university level, and the message I was trying to convey is don't forget the underpinnings of the discipline of geography. That as we go into artificial intelligence and machine learning and a lot of remote sensing powerful techniques and tools, there's a lot of methodologies that classically trained geography brings us in terms of ground truth, in terms of understanding people and culture and sort of transactional nature at the personal level. And so if you combine that type of in situ knowledge with all of the remote technologies that are advancing so quickly, I think that's a good combination, and they're complementary skills that we can't forget about.
How has that technology acceleration influenced the way that geographers like you do their jobs, and how has the proliferation of the kind of information that geographers use, now that it's available so widely in the commercial sector, has that changed the way that people like you do your jobs?
It hasn't changed that much the way we do our jobs, because we're a small office and we rely on some of the more powerful organizations that have those capabilities. And so we are the recipients of a lot of the information at a much faster pace than we ever used to be able to get it. We work a lot on humanitarian issues, and it's actually hard to operate in that space now because of the instant information we're getting, drones flying over earthquake sites. And so we have to figure out what space we can occupy in order to provide our policymakers the type of information that they still need from this huge amount of data. We have policymakers that don't have time to play around with interactive mapping tools or read a 15-page article on something. So we have to figure out, particularly in the maps we do, how I can give a real quick picture instantly that'll convey the message we need to convey. So I've done some lectures on lying with maps, and I wouldn't say that you lie with maps, but you can take data and give a different message depending on the content and how it's used. Our cartographers are pretty talented at doing that.
Yeah, it's the old, people said that about economists for a long time. A good economist can make the data say whatever the economist wants it to say. Right. Well, same thing, it sounds like, in the geography.
Sure, we can make something pop out of the map easily. Yeah. That's the message we want to give.
Yeah. So the underlying theme, it sounds like, of what you're saying is speed is the big change agent. And I guess the good news is people can make decisions instantaneously almost. I guess the bad news is sometimes they have to make decisions instantaneously with maybe limited information.
Well, I think the benefit of that also is the QA/QC is much faster. So we can be more confident of a lot of the information because we have such powerful computing tools to check the veracity of what we need to know. But at the same time, I made a point in my talk yesterday that we can't be afraid of having gaps in our maps or gaps in our data, because sometimes not having information is the type of information you have to have. And a lot of times people, in an effort to fill a map, will fill it with information that may be out of date or that they know is not the most accurate. So we have to be a little bit, I think, circumspect in presenting everything instantaneously all the time.
How does one discern whether it sounds like you just said no information sometimes is better than old or bad information. How does one discern when when's the right time to make that kind of a decision? Well,
I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I will say that I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what intelligence is. And a lot of times they believe that good intelligence is based on a lot of information that nobody else has access to. When in reality, I think a good intelligence analyst makes judgments based on the information that we don't know and fills in the gaps with judgments. We may be right, we may be wrong. I had a boss once that said he'd rather have us be wrong and get noticed then never be noticed.
Yeah.
And so to have the freedom to make those types of judgments based on the best available information, based on solid tools and methodology, I think is important, and we may not always be right.
Another underlying theme that it sounds like is that technology is accelerating what you can do, but the techniques that you use to do what you and your colleagues do hasn't changed very much. Is that accurate?
I would say in my office, we still rely mostly on traditional cartographic products. And we have outstanding cartographers in the office, I think the best in the business. And having an elegant map, I still think is important. With all the tools and technologies we have, last year at the GEOINT Symposium we had a session called "What is a Map?" And I made the point there that in many ways a map it's art as well as information.
Mm-hmm. Why is that important?
Why is what
that a map it can also be a work of art, or that it maybe should be?
I think in order to get noticed.
Yeah.
We're playing in a very crowded field. And if you want something to stand out and get noticed, I think the artistic quality of a map is still important.
Interesting. Where do you see this going as a lot of the discussion here has been around the digital transformation that some of these organizations are undergoing? And you mentioned the theme is from maps to metaverse. What's the trajectory look like moving forward in your view?
Well, I think as we can see here in the exhibition floor of the GEOINT Symposium, I think the locus or the focus of technology innovation is no longer with the U.S. government. It used to be, and now I think it's in the private sector. And I think the trick and the challenge now is to how to leverage all of that innovation and figure out how best to target the resources that the government does have, and let the private sector, take the lead in this.
Does that make your job easier or harder, do you think, that so much capability and so much information now lies in the hands of private sector organizations?
I think it makes my job harder, to tell you the truth, because there's so much information. I mean, everybody's struggling with big data and how to figure out which data are the most important. So I think it makes my job a bit more difficult to separate the chaff from the wheat.
Yeah, and that was going to be my last question, which is that the biggest challenge that you have is when this information comes in from the commercial sector, understanding to what degree you can trust it and have confidence in using it?
No, I think the biggest challenge I have is to figure out what information to provide for our policymakers at the Department of State, because at the end of the day, that's my job. I respond to the needs and the requirements of our senior policymakers, the Secretary of State on down, and sometimes they need the information they need is information that may be readily available, but we have to package it in a way for a particular meeting or a particular negotiation. So to figure out what the timeliness and when to get that message to our policymakers, I think, is the challenge in the world of big data.
Lee Schwartz, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure.
You can read more about Lee Schwartz's office at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today with Francis Rose is back in a moment. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today. Welcome back. FedGov Today is presenting Innovation in Government from Soft Week. The guests include special operations leaders from government and industry. You can watch it Tuesday evening at 8:30 on WJLA 24/7 News, or watch it on demand at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today returns next Sunday morning at 10:30. Hope you'll join me then. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.